morning, folks. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for the session. We have a very interesting session today. We have a great panel of experts from, Cardinal Health, FTD, Palo Alto, joining us today, sharing their key insights that will help you guys, think about security for public cloud and applications that you're building today. So the agenda for the session would be, I'll start with a few slides, 5 or so slides, just explaining the key concepts, which will be especially helpful for folks who are new to public cloud. And then we'll transition quickly into the panel discussion. And I'll invite the panelists to come join me on stage, and we'll have a Q&A round after the panel is over, so folks in the audience can come up and ask questions if there are any questions you want to ask any of the panelists. Without further delay, I think the key concept that folks need to keep in mind as they're moving into the public cloud is, security will be top of the mind, and your security in the public cloud can be, same as what you have on-prem. It could be better than what you have on-prem, but the way security will be implemented in public clouds would be different than what you had done in public cloud in on-prem. As an example, in Google Cloud, there are a lot of services you could use. You could be using GCE, GKE, or you could be using storage. And for example, for GCS and other storage services, the access to those services is controlled through APIs. So when you're thinking about securing those services, you have to think about what services, what controls, what policies you would have in mind, so people don't have access to the storage that is being managed by Google for you. There are a couple of key concepts that you have to think about when you're thinking about security for your applications. One is, how do you protect from the edge of the network to close to your workload? That's the core of your network, or to the endpoint itself. So there will be layers of security, and I'll kind of double-click to explain what the layers are. And the other key concept to think about is there will be different levels of security rules you would apply. So they'll start from kind of coarse rules that apply to everything, and then they'll move on to more fine-grained rules that you can apply to control at the microservice level. So as you're kind of thinking about how do I take care of security, you have to kind of broadly think about some of these concepts. So just double-clicking to kind of give you guys a quick flavor of what this would mean. So for example, if you're protecting your web application, you have to think about, how do I do DDoS mitigation, or how do I protect my applications from layer 7 attacks? And you would do that by, for example, using the global load balancer we have, and the Cloud Armor product that was part of the keynote today, and the IAP product as well. So you would use that product. You could have rules, layer 3, layer 4 rules, or layer 7 rules, that will protect the public-facing, internet-facing applications you have. So that will be kind of the protection at the edge that I spoke about. And then you will bring it closer to your VPC perimeter and think about, at your VPC perimeter level, what kind of securities do you build? And how do I lock in access to my data? How do I lock in my access to the applications? And you would do that with VPC-level firewalls. This is where you could have, rules like, I only want HTTPS traffic coming in from the internet, so you'll implement those rules at your VPC level. And the example that I shared about GCS and having controls on who to access, you will do that using the VPC service controls. So those are kind of the key concepts you have to think about when you're protecting your perimeter. Use the VPC service controls, use the native firewall that we have. Then taking it to the next level down, now most customers would want to have more detailed, more fine-grained controls. Controls like, at your service account level, what your service accounts can do, cannot do, what services they can touch, what data they can access. So you would have the next level of security there, at GKE level, at different IAM policy level, to bring your controls to that level. And all of this, is greatly complemented by partner products. So there are native Google products that will provide you different levels of security, but you should complement them with partner products that are, if you have a broad ecosystem of partner products, and you should think about how partner products would help you kind of complete your security story for GCP. So I'll just kind of show you a quick picture on, I will not cover all this kind of boxes here, but this is just a quick view for you to explain how partner products complement what Google does. So there's a foundation infrastructure level that is covered by Google, but If you go above that level into storage network, you'll add on partner products to provide complementary security services. Things like products like next generation firewalls is something you would work with companies like Palo Alto Networks and use their production and their products to complement the products and services that Google has to protect you. So your overall security architecture would be a combination of what we natively provide and partner products that we have. So I think those were the key concepts I wanted to cover, I think especially for folks who are new to GCP, so they understand how we think about security, how partners come into the picture, and so on. One key concept that I wanted to add on before we call in the panelists was the shared VPC concept. It's a very powerful concept. If you haven't looked at it so far, I would recommend you take a look. And just kind of taking a step back of why this is powerful, the key problem that people had in public clouds was, every department, every app owner taking a credit card, creating their own projects, and there will be thousands of projects, and the central security team, IT team would have no control on those projects. In Google, that problem was solved using the organization concept and having a shared VPC architecture where you would have a host VPC that your security team, your IT teams who can implement their policies, define the subnets, have a next-gen firewall like Palo Alto in your host VPC, and have a centralized way of managing policies for all the service projects that your app owners are creating. So your app owners can have the flexibility of creating the projects they want without having to worry about security, and you as the security admin has the control using this shared VPC concept by having your security defined at the host project level. And the routing of all the traffic to the host project, having centralized policies are done in one place. And when I explain this concept to our partners, key customers, they're saying, hey, this is the closest we have seen we can get to the old on-prem centralized control model. So this is a very powerful concept that helps you do security at scale and from a centralized fashion. So if you haven't taken a look at the shared VPC, please take a look. It also gels very well with our partner products like the Palo Alto VM series firewall, and they plug in beautifully into the shared VPC model. With that, I would like to invite the panelists to join me on the stage. So Rob from Cardinal Health, Bill, FTD, and Sanjay from Palo Alto Networks. To start off, I think it'll be great to start with introductions so folks know what your roles are in your companies, and then we'll go deeper into your journey into Google Cloud and how you thought about security. So Rob, if you could go first with introductions.
Yep, sure.
If
Hi, I'm
you would
Rob
like to
Ravenscroft.
Sorry, 1 second. If you'd like to ask a question, please step to the mics in the aisles.
Okay.
And we'll keep the questions for the end of the session, so we'll do the panel questions and then open up the floor for questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Rob Ravenscroft. I'm with the security architecture team at Cardinal Health. We have a great partnership with our cloud services, cloud engineering team, which I think is very important. The reason that we looked at going to Google and GKE is simply speed, scalability, and obviously security. That's very important to me.
Perfect. Thank you. So Bill, if you could do your introduction as well.
Yeah, I'm Bill O'Brien from FTD. So it's a forest and gifting company. I manage the network in the telecom group, but we work very closely with security and the cloud team. So we're a pretty small organization going into the cloud. So we have a lot of different hats that we wear. So the more knowledge that we have for the different areas, the better off we're able to execute.
Sanjay, please introduce.
Thanks. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Sanjay Gupta. I'm Director of Product Management at Palo Alto Networks for virtualization and cloud security. And as part of the role, my team is responsible for building products, right? Specifically VM series, next generation firewall for securing public cloud infrastructure and networks. As part of the role, I participate in a lot of customer discussions and particularly cloud-related advisory boards and product councils. So really happy to be here to share some of my perspective to you guys to help you in your journey.
Perfect. Thank you, Sanjay. So I'll start with Rob, just kind of trying to understand your journey into GCP. What made your company decide to be on GCP, and when you were thinking about security, how did you think about security, and how did you think about Palo Alto being part of that answer?
Yeah, that was kind of an easy one. Google has always been known for security ever since Gmail came out, and just the advances since then. It made it pretty easy to look at Google and GCP. Palo Alto, I have about 20 years of network security experience, so I've worked with every different type of firewall that you can think of over the past 20 years. Palo Alto pretty much changed the game when they came out with the next-gen firewall. So I was very excited to see that they have a partnership with Google.
Thank you. So I think, Bill, kind of similar question to you. So about your GCP journey and how do you think about security there?
Yeah, so from our organization, we had basically a very monolithic web brand that we had. We had like 6 different brands out there, and each one was basically taking up its own space. So they brought in some new leaders into the organization, and they basically said, hey, we need to bring this stuff together, right? So we had an initiative to basically take all of those brands and bring them into the cloud. So we basically had a bake-off between Google and another vendor, and Google won out primarily because of the GKE and being able to, how Google has that set up to be able to be managed, right? Because one of the things is that as being a small company, and you don't want to be experts in everything, right? So the things that you can actually farm off to another company, the better off you're actually going to be. So this way you can actually focus on the business and actually focusing on technology. So that was one of the big drivers. And then Palo Alto, we already had Palo Alto in-house. And as soon as we found out, because we basically went to the Google Cloud in January, and then we had to have it stood up by Mother's Day, so which was basically by the end of April. So within 4 months, we basically decided to go with Google Cloud, and then we actually started to roll it out. And as soon as we did that, I started talking with Palo Alto and seeing if they had actually a beta program, and then we actually got it run on from there.
And how was the Mother's Day experience for you? Were things smooth?
It was actually, yeah. So we actually had Akamai in front of it, so we were actually able to load how much we were going to send to the legacy side and how much we were actually going to send to GCP. So at what point, if you actually put the domain in directly, we actually had 100% of that traffic going into GCP.
Great to hear that. Thank you. So Bill, one more question for you, just kind of double-clicking on what you have on GCP. What kind of workloads do you run? And how much are you guys into containers, GKE? Any insights that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, we're extensively GKE. So when we actually first spun it up, we wanted to use shared VPCs. But at that time, shared VPCs weren't available onto the GKE clusters. So what we ended up having to do was we ended up having to create VPNs within GCP itself to go from the shared VPC into the GKE cluster. But now they've actually brought that in line, and that's one of the biggest things that we actually saw with Google was how quickly they're able to move things from alpha to beta to actually having it provisioned out. So, and even each day you go on to the Google console and all of a sudden you see like a new pop-up and it's just like, hey, what is this? What is this going to be doing? And all of a sudden then that's where IAM comes really into play, because the more people have the ability to make changes, the more dangerous it's going to be. So all of a sudden as new features get turned up, you want to be able to make sure that you actually control the access, because all of a sudden they're going to be like, hey, what does this button do? And all of a sudden I click on that and then you won't know what happened. So,
perfect. Thank you. So Bill, question for you similarly, if you could double click on what kind of deployment you have and what you're using for GKE or any other.
Rob, sorry. Yeah, right now we have a lot of non-production workloads out there. My 2 experts in this space, actually 3 are in the front 2 rows here. So if we get to the Q&A, I might bring them up to answer more detailed questions. But really, I would start with non-production, obviously, get familiar with it. And if you have the DevOps mentality or methodology, make sure that you have very good ops, not just dev. So understand routing, networking at the start of it, that'll definitely help you out.
Thank you. Sanjay, question for you. You must be talking to a lot of customers and hearing from them about how they're moving into cloud. Any insights, customer stories you have on where you see customers heading, and what are the key trends there, key challenges that you're seeing?
Sure. Thanks, Meet. So, I mean, clearly, I think everyone knows that cloud is definitely getting more mainstream, if not in terms of real deployments, but I definitely see in terms of interest, right? Containers are, I'd say, relatively new or newer, right? So, so not many customers are, I'd say, onto it at this point. But two main perspective I'd like to share, right? Which sort of strike me when I speak to customers is the first one is about the difference in perspective or point of view between the business and the CISOs. Right? So businesses typically think that the IT and the security is not moving fast enough, while if you talk to a lot of CISOs and the security folks, they think that the business is pulling them in very hard. So there is this big disconnect, right, between the speed at which the business wants to move and the speed at which the security folks want to move, right? And I'd say that in a relatively few successful organizations I've seen is where the security folks actually have taken the baton and they are essentially moving at the same speed or even faster than the business. And those organizations I can see are really, being very productive. And moving and innovating at a faster speed. The second perspective which I see is the fact that is the chasm between the folks who have jumped onto the cloud and they have started their cloud journey versus the folks who have not, right? And one of my realization has been that, hey, cloud is obviously all about speed, but it's also about innovation and being able to adapt and iterate, right? Because I'd say that most cloud providers, including Google itself, as Bill just mentioned, is like they're coming out with new services at a phenomenal rate. So you should be willing to both apply security at the right speed, as well as willing to iterate with these cloud providers and improve your security controls and security mechanisms over time.
Perfect. Thank you, Sanjay. So Sanjay, one more question for you. So as customers and folks in the audience are thinking about security, what are your kind of thoughts about what key things they need to keep in mind when they're thinking about security, when thinking about moving more and more workloads into the cloud? What are the key things that you would recommend them to kind of keep at top of their list?
Sure. So I'll start off, and extend what I was saying before. So the first thing is, so I'd say there are two things overall. One is speed, and second is new and different attack surfaces. So as you're moving into cloud and your applications and workloads into cloud, right, you have to realize that cloud is all about speed. So that means that the security also has to be able to move at the speed of the cloud. And which means that the security has to get highly automated, like your applications and workloads are. Number two, the security has to become more cloud native, which basically means it has to get integrated into your cloud environments and leveraging the cloud services which the cloud infrastructure is offering, and that is going to give it that cloud native flavor. And the last in this one is the security fundamentally has to shift left, which basically means security has to get more ingrained with the app dev lifecycle. Right? It shouldn't remain disjointed, right, from the application development and deployment itself. And that is why at Palo Alto Networks we lay a lot of emphasis on that, and there are a lot of product capabilities, and including automation, tight integration with Google Cloud, as well as making policies more and more automated is what we invest on the product side. And then the second aspect is that that as you are thinking about the cloud security, you have to realize that there are some things which have changed in the cloud, right? Which means that there are some attack surfaces which have gotten minimized or gone away, right? As Vineet was showing the slide earlier, right? The infrastructure, which is the ownership or of the cloud provider, or Google in this case, is going to be secured by the Google themselves. But then there are new attack surfaces which have opened up, which basically means things like PaaS services that you're going to consume in Google Cloud, right? And you need to think about how to secure those services, right? And that may mean that you will have to look at new mechanisms and ways, particularly more API-centric mechanisms and ways to secure your environment. So those are the two main points in summary. One is the speed and how you make sure that your security operates at the speed of the application. And number two, be very aware of the way the attack surfaces have changed in this environment, and then how you can secure those new attack surfaces.
Perfect, Sanjay. Those were great insights. So, Bill, question for you. You kind of decided to go down the GKE path. What were the key security aspects or concerns you had to think about when you decided to go production? And you guys had a limited time frame to get the security right as you were kind of ramping up for production and for Mother's Day. So, can you share some key insights there?
Yeah, so with GKE, they primarily went with GKE because of the security that was already handled within Google. So because they've already had that pretty much established, it was good for them to be able to use that and for us to be able to go and move forward with that. So because we had such a short time window, what we did was we stood up a QA environment for them. So we spun up a QA environment that had a VPN connection back on the on-prem, so that they could actually start pushing out their code, building their clusters, and start doing a lot of development and so forth, till we actually figured out what the production environment was actually going to look like and how big it actually needed to be. And from the slide that was up there before with the VM series, that we ended up spinning up the Palo Alto and having multiple interfaces off of it. So we had production, we had pre-prod, we had PCI, and then we basically had kind of like a services one. And then there was a DMZ side as well. And on the DMZ side, that was basically where you had the shared VPC to allow you to connect back on the on-prem. So within the GKE, it had a lot with the controls and the clusters and everything like that. So it just provided a lot of out-of-the-box features that just allowed the management for us to be spun up very quickly. And then it took a lot of things off of our plates, so that way then we don't have to worry about OS patches and things like that. And then also it handles the internal load balancing and things like that as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So Rob, similar question for you. As you guys were implementing, how did you think about, what products you would use within Google or, partner products?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first the key is having that partnership with the CISO organization. Our vice president spoke yesterday, John Latchaw, and talked about, take your CISO out for a few beers or his favorite beverage repeatedly. Keep them on your side. That partnership is critical from the start. You don't want to come in and have to bolt on security or be given a stack of requirements later. So really partner with the security team. So our journey was really good because we have this great partnership at Cardinal Health between the teams. And we found that regularly meeting, doing weekly stand-ups, just working together really made a huge difference. So as we started looking at cloud native first, that's always what we're challenged to do. What can you secure by default within the cloud provider? And then, if you get through all those requirements, you do identify a few gaps where something like Palo Alto is required, primarily ingress and egress protection from the internet. So in a highly regulated environment, HIPAA, GDPR now, you have to have those protections in place. But I would urge everybody in the room, look at the cloud native first, stretch that to its limits, and then start to look at the third parties.
Perfect. So thanks for that. So going back to Sanjay, to you, from Palo Alto Networks perspective, what are your, I think you shared a lot of insights. Are there any recommendations in terms of, as the customer is going through this cloud journey, on how they should interface with you and Google? Any other recommendations they should keep in mind on how to go about thinking about security?
Sure. Thanks, Meet. So, fundamentally, I think that in many aspects, right, going to cloud from a security perspective is no different than previously. which is that the core principles of securing or security still applies and are as relevant to cloud as they were for any environment. And those core principles being, which we've already believed in, is the fact that A, you need to have complete visibility in terms of what is going on in that environment. B, you need to be able to, from that point onwards, be able to minimize your attack surface, which is basically the security principle of least privilege. So that means that only the necessary activity, whether it's the traffic, it's user activities, transactions, is happening in that environment. And then once you have that as the base, then you manage any known threats in the environment so you can block them and control them and prevent them right away. And then on top of that, have the ability to be able to detect and remediate any unknown threats, right? So those are the core security principles that we have been operating on for the last 12 years since Palo Alto Networks have been founded. And I believe that they're equally applicable to cloud. The thing which is different about the cloud is that, is how do you apply those security principles and those security controls in this environment, right? Which is essentially about making sure that these things can be applied at the speed of the cloud, and these things can be applied across all attack surfaces, right? Even some of those new attack surfaces I was talking about, right, previously. So specifically, our recommendation for cloud security is that, hey, to be able to achieve that, right, you need to look at multiple dimensions of your cloud deployment, which is network, endpoint, and the APIs, right? So on the network, you should be, as Rob was mentioning, right, on the network, you should be able to get visibility and be able to control, right, your inbound and outbound traffic into your cloud deployment, as well as be able to segment across multiple applications or workloads that may be deployed in the cloud environment. What Vineet was talking about, the shared VPC, that's a great step forward from Google, which allows you to be able to do that in a much more effective fashion and efficient fashion, right? So with that, you can have a good control on who can access your applications and what kind of access is happening for those applications. Now, beyond that, on the endpoint, you need to make sure that there is no malicious activity happening and there is no zero-day exploits happening. So you need to have mechanisms so as to be able to control the security and the endpoint. And then lastly, it's about the fact that as you go more and more cloud native, you will actually consume more and more of cloud native services, which is the services, the great services that the cloud providers like Google is building into their environments. You will use their storage, you will use their database as a service, right? You will use managed GKE as a service. And as you do that, right, you may, in some sense, lose complete visibility in terms of what is going on, and you need a mechanism through which you can basically understand what is going on in this environment and be able to apply your corporate policies on the data which is being stored and operated upon in these environments. And the best way to do that is a platform like Google provides a very rich APIs. And that is what we have looked at, right? And via APIs, through tools like Evident, we can actually give you that complete visibility and monitoring on what is happening in these environments, as well as let you apply the enterprise policies in terms of what is allowed and what is not allowed. And if anything happens outside the norm, you can auto-remediate. So, for example, it's like you could say, you know what, I do not want any workload, which is getting deployed in my Google VPC to have internet access, right? Unless it has been approved by the policy per se. And if anything like this happens, then automatically stop and prevent that from happening, or automatically deploy a next generation firewall in front of the workload, right? So that you have complete control on the ingress and egress traffic. So that is what is important. So in summary, I believe that in a cloud deployment, the same security principles apply, and you need to look at it from all the dimensions of network, endpoint, and the APIs.
Perfect, thank you. And completely agree with what Sanjay said. We've been working closely with our partners to make sure the partner products are integrated, and we think about security in the cloud more in terms of how can we make security better in the cloud than what was on-prem. How do we make it more automated? Everybody knows there's a kind of a shortage of security professionals. So how do we get ahead of that problem by automating it more? So it's still early days, but we're working closely with our partners to kind of make security as seamless as possible, as automated as possible. So looking forward to more and more innovation together.
Sure. I mean, and maybe just to add to that, yes, we are definitely working very closely with Google on that, in that direction, in terms of building native integrations into Google services like stack driver, autoscaler function, building integrations with GKE. So you can define your security policies using Kubernetes label in GKE, and we'll be able to enforce, right, without you having to learn about IP addresses or other mechanisms of how you apply security policies. So all of that, essentially, I'd say are the foundational building blocks, right, which allows you to have security move at the speed of the cloud and be very seamlessly deployed and operated in these environments.
Yes, thank you. So Bill, a couple of questions for you. I think you had a great experience deploying something in GKE. In the container world, GKE world, there are kind of new sets of challenges, new kind of securities people have to think about. And also, companies in some cases have to rethink how their teams are organized because things are kind of moving at a different pace. So any insights on, what were the new things that you had to think about in terms of security challenges, in terms of people organization, how teams should be structured, would be especially helpful for folks who are kind of new into the GKE world on what are the key things that are very unique because you were on the GKE stuff or as people are moving into the more containerized world.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenge was that it's going into the cloud, right? You just don't know what is actually, connected to what, right? You're just assuming is that, hey, Google has their stuff together and be like, okay, hey, how can we actually make sure this is actually occurring, right? And so I was actually in a presentation yesterday about compliance, right? And one of the things in there was to trust, but then to verify, right? And that was one of the things of actually going into GCP was that it's such an unknown thing that it was just like, all right, at least if we could have one common thing that we actually know, right? So if we just like, hey, we're going to put the Palo Alto there, and we know that everything has to flow through the Palo Alto. So then we can actually see what the flows are actually going to occur, right? So this way then we can actually trust that. But then as a GKE, they started to spin things up, and all of a sudden it was just like, hey, we need connectivity between here and there and so forth. So then we actually started to build that. So a lot of people who used to be spending time, building servers and so forth are now becoming DevOps managers, right? They're working on DevOps to be able to push things out through that. So even more on the security side where it's just like, okay, hey, how can we actually go to like the next level? So kind of like Rob had said about the native side of it, right? Where it's just like, okay, hey, we're going to use the GLBs, right? So we already have F5s on-prem, but it's just like, right, do we really need, another set of load balancers out there where Google already has, load balancers kind of like set up for us to be able to do. So we basically just took this step of like, where do we actually need the tools and how do we actually get to there? So even going like through the sessions yesterday with like MTLS and so forth, where it's just like, hey, those are going to be things that we're actually going to be looking at. And that's the biggest thing within security is that it's just going to be layer upon layer upon layer. And I heard yesterday one of the things was a really good analogy was that it was a gentleman from Red Hat who basically had said, oh, I'm sorry, it was from Netflix, who basically said, you don't want to build gates, but you want to build guardrails. So you want to be able to know where the traffic is actually going, but you don't want to just put up so many restrictions that it's just like, hey, it's very, cumbersome for the business to be able to be flexible and be able to get to where it actually needs to go. So.
Perfect. That goes inside. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something that caught my attention there was trust but verify. In security you hear that a lot, but I think we're moving more to the zero trust concept. Beyond Corp is talking about it. Palo Alto has been talking about it for quite some time. Do not trust anything, right? So every packet, every authentication, come at that with a zero trust mindset, but you have to do it in a seamless way, like you mentioned, Bill. So, don't put gates up where gates don't need to be, but think about not trusting everything instead of trusting and verifying. I even get in the habit of removing that label called trust and untrust, because it gets you in the mindset that everything coming in that interface is trusted when it's not. So I just wanted to make that comment. And then also, if you have to change your architecture to fit a Palo Alto in or a Nginx or another box, it's probably a bad design. So you should have a modular approach where the ALB, or sorry, your GLB, your load balancer, works as it's supposed to work, and then you can insert your security tools in between that. You shouldn't have to change that.
And Rob, similar to what we discussed with Bill, any kind of organizational changes or any structural changes that you're seeing, because the cloud world is different from the on-prem world, or even further in the container deployments, are they different from what VM deployments used to be?
Yeah, so Cardinal Health actually has a dedicated cloud services team. It's almost like everybody's title has cloud in it now. So I think it is important to kind of build that team and say, hey, we're going to do this. We're not just going to act like a bunch of server guys trying to manage cloud infrastructure. You really have to get training, education, and really go all in. But I think as you build that team, make sure that security and finance is all part of that ecosystem. From the DevOps, I'm big into calling it DevSecOps, which a lot of people don't like that, but I think eventually it'll just be called DevOps again. Once security is shifted left, we have a secure CI/CD pipeline, and then I think it'll be called DevOps again, at least from a security perspective, because security is inherent.
Absolutely. I think that's the vision. Security being kind of, as Sanjay was saying, part of the whole CI/CD pipeline, make it as transparent as possible that people don't even realize security is there. I think that's the nirvana state. So Bill, I think there was a lot of discussion in the keynote as well about Istio and how Istio can help with security. Any thoughts about how Istio would come into the picture and how it can help folks, and what you guys are thinking about Istio?
Yeah, so we went through one of the sessions yesterday on Istio, and it's very much in line with Kubernetes, with how Google has basically set it up, is that it just helps you to do the job of actually helping the business, right? It moves you off of actually having to, create, in-depth reports, and it gets you into MTLS, and it gets you into more security focus, so that way then it's just inherently built into it, right? So as they deploy the applications, as they start to pull out the development, that it's actually already integrated into it. So that way then you can set your policies and controls, and it's basically already set. So we're looking forward to it, actually.
Perfect. So Sanjay, from a security company perspective, where do you see Istio playing a role, and what is Palo Alto thinking about Istio, and how to kind of gel the capabilities that Istio brings in along with the capabilities that Palo Alto products bring in?
Sure. So I'd say, I see Istio as no different than the fact that, hey, the Google Cloud Platform by itself provides many of the native controls built in from a security point of view. Right? Istio is trying to raise the bar and do the similar things in the GKE or Kubernetes environment. Right? So we absolutely are looking to both integrate and co-work with Istio, which is Istio is able to provide certain value in terms of base level security, in terms of giving you visibility on what is happening in your GKE environment or in general any Kubernetes environment, and we're actively working with the GKE team and the Istio team to figure out how we can insert NG firewall in these environments and what kind of a value over and above Istio provides that we can add. And the biggest area that we believe is going to be around threat and around threat mitigation and threat prevention.
Perfect. I think last round of questions, I think I'll start with you, Rob. Any comments on Istio, and in your concluding kind of remarks, any key lessons learned or key points in addition to what has been discussed today that you want to share with the audience so they can benefit from your experience?
Yeah, Istio, I'm really excited about. The guys here from Cardinal probably saw me text them about at least 100 times about Istio in the last few days, because I see the security play, how we can do the east and west segmentation. We talked a little bit about north and south, meaning in from the internet, out, in and outbound from the internet. But there's also a problem with east and west security between your containers, between workloads. And I think where Istio can bring that security in between is definitely going to be an advantage. Some lesson learned, I think, go back to don't change the architecture based on a security requirement. Try to do it transparently. This is hard for a lot of security operations teams that have their favorite endpoint technology, their favorite tool that doesn't work the same way in the cloud. I would say start to learn other ways to do things to get the same result. Just don't force legacy type tools in the cloud. So that was a lesson learned early on that we did a little bit of that I would urge you to not look at.
Perfect. And Rob, just a follow-on question to that. Do you think, in the old on-prem world, I had met companies who would say we have 120 security products and more. Do you think security, looking a year out, is security consolidating, or do you see it still fragmented?
Yeah, I absolutely see it consolidated. We're going through this effort right now. We have so many tools, more tools than I could even name, that don't really talk to each other. They're probably not utilized, even 20%. So I see a large focus on consolidation, getting the visibility to the security operations team that they want. Don't NAT things 100 times, so they have to correlate that. So simplify that so it takes minutes to troubleshoot. But I definitely see a consolidation of tools.
Thank you. So Bill, it's kind of similar question, concluding remarks, any key lessons learned that you can share with the folks in the audience, and your thoughts of and consolidation in security. Where do you see security headed in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I definitely see security being consolidated. I think everybody's going to have security basically somewhere in their title. If it used to be, DevOps security, network security, even just, physical IT security and everything like that. I want to look more into like the Google security command center and see how that can actually help benefit with it. So even though, your title might not be as just like, hey, I might be a developer, I might be, an administrator or whatever, security is just such an important part of everybody's job. So, and that kind of like comes a little bit from the military side of me as well. But I think one of the things for the lessons learned is Google allows you to, or the cloud, Google, allows you to basically, reset your environment. So that's one of the biggest benefits that I have. So is like, especially with ours, where it was like a monolithic and we wanted to go to microsegmentation, it basically allowed us to fix, known issues within the network. So instead of actually spending money and, spending CapEx or spending development time of actually fixing something on-prem, when you go to the cloud, it allows you to basically reset at that point in time, which is actually extremely beneficial, because the things that were basically broken, you actually have a chance to fix. Things that you actually want to improve on, it gives you a chance to improve on those items as well. So I think that's one of the big benefits of we actually go into the cloud.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. So Sanjay, last question for you as well. You've been in the security industry talking to thousands of customers. Any key insights on where security is headed a couple of years down the road, and how Palo Alto is thinking about security as it will exist in 2020?
Sure, thanks. So one, a couple of observations here. So one thing I'd say that clearly, a couple of years down the line, even today, it's going to be a multi-cloud world, right? Which means you could be in multiple public clouds and in your on-prem environments as well, right? So I think it is important for you to think from your security design architecture perspective that how you can play in a multi-cloud world, right? And I'd say Google is doing a great job here in terms of building technologies like Kubernetes, right, which can allow you to be highly portable and operate in this multi-cloud world, right? And clearly that is one area where we are extremely focused on ourselves, so as to let you have the flexibility to operate in this world without the burden of trying to manage a fragmented set of environments and managing hundreds of tools which are purpose built for specific environments, but it adds tremendous amount of complexity and are not utilized properly. So that is one big area where I see that things are gonna move and which is gonna be relevant, right, from your point of view. The second area where we see from a security perspective itself is that security is going to be more and more of a platform play, right? I think that is the point which both Rob and Bill were echoing before, in the sense that that for the security to be effective, you need to be able to correlate different independent things together to be able to drive the necessary outcomes, right? And best of breed, point solutions do not play in that world, right? So it's going to be more and more of a platform play. So you should be looking at tools which can operate in these heterogeneous environments and are able to consolidate multiple security functions together. And the last point, though not necessarily specifically tied to what you said, but I know that you've been asking Rob and Bill about organizations per se, is that I think in most enterprises which have been able to successfully cross the chasm and move faster into cloud environments, there has to be an org shift, which means it cannot be teams operating in silos in terms of this is the networking team and this is my security team and this is my application team. The teams are coming together as a cloud team, right? And in that sense also there is some kind of a consolidation, so to speak, of teams which is happening, right? And that is very important, right, to happen for cloud adaption to be successful.
Perfect, perfect. Great insights from everybody on the panel. So we have last few minutes for any kind of questions that anybody from the audience have. There are mics on both sides. Happy to take a few questions. And please introduce yourself at the company that you work for.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Basir. The takeaway that I got from here is you can't lift and shift the applications from your on-prem into the cloud. You have to rebuild it from almost cloud-native services in mind. With that said, having tools that are living in the data center, would it make sense to try to reach their reach into the public cloud, or should we just leave them behind and not even try to move those into the public cloud?
Lewis, do you want to take this one? Mr. Lift and Shift.
So at Cardinal Health, we've actually been very successful in moving our applications as is from on-prem into the cloud. Some applications, depending on how they're interacting with the internet, we need to make a few slight modifications to, like setting up global load balancers, things like that. But we've migrated hundreds of applications in non-production. We're beginning our phase of migrating the production apps as well.
Okay. And in the past, these tools required network packet visibility. Is that an issue? Is that a thing now where you're losing layer one access to this? Do you still need that, or is that something that you don't even think about anymore?
We've actually been able to, using VPC flow logs and firewall allow and deny logs in Google, we've been able to provide our security teams everything they've been looking for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi, this is John Skinner with Shape Security. We provide GCP-hosted AI to prevent account takeover of login servers. And my question is to both Rob and Bill, are there any categories of data or applications that are deemed still too sensitive to move into a public cloud? For example, in the case of Cardinal, HIPAA-regulated patient health records, or perhaps the patient login that sits in front of it, or in the case of FTD, is your whole e-commerce platform and the customer login sitting in front of it in the public cloud, and if not, why not?
For us, it's obviously PHI and HIPAA, but also GDPR, and I'd say absolutely not. We can make it much more secure in the cloud in minutes versus like months and years to do that same type of micro-segmentation. So that's my answer.
Yeah, for credit card information and also for customer information, yes, we're going to be migrating up into the cloud. So it's not there yet, but our plan is to do there, but we're going to have additional security around it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more quick question,
So
and then
I
after
think
that.
question on that side,
Yep,
please.
and then after that, you can discuss in private.
Thank you. And sorry, just one last comment. I think after the session we'll be here, so we can take questions, after the session as well. Please go ahead.
I'm Ian Lim. I'm the CISO of the Irvine Company, and I wanted to follow up a little bit on that question. There's a lot of discussion in kind of the GDPR world and how Google and Amazon and Facebook have the ability from a cloud platform perspective to do BI on the back of the data, right? And I know that that's on the consumer side, not on the enterprise side. But nonetheless, right? You spoke a little bit about VJ. You spoke a little bit about visibility. Are there any assurances that we have that below the line of what we can control, that Google has no access or BI to our data? especially the PII stuff,
Yeah.
the healthcare stuff.
So absolutely, and this was a concern that we have heard from customers as well, other customers. So there's a lot of work done on access transparency. So things like every time, if you guys call customer support for Google, and customer support goes and looks at anything in your organization, any action they take, any page they visit will be logged. So there is, look at that. I think that is, a lot of work has been done to make sure customers feel very comfortable when nobody from Google is looking into your data. Anytime if they look into the data because you called into support, anything they did would be logged. And you would have visibility and you can see it almost real time that what they're doing.
Does Google publish a paper or?
Absolutely, absolutely. 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 Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for the panelists. I think the amazing insights, and thanks a lot to Palo Alto Networks for helping to make this session possible. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.